Hello, everyone, and welcome back to English Stream. My name is Ed, and if you're new here, this channel is all about helping you improve your English through listening, real expressions, and natural spoken language. Today's episode is going to be extremely useful if you want your English to sound more natural, confident, and fluent. But first, let me ask you something. Have you ever been in a conversation with a native speaker and suddenly heard a phrase that made absolutely no sense? Maybe someone said something like, "It cost me an arm and a leg," or "Let's break the ice," and you thought, wait, what does that mean? Why are we talking about arms and legs? Why are we breaking ice? Well, that's because English is full of idioms. Idioms are expressions whose meanings are not literal. If you translate them word by word, they often sound strange. But once you understand them, they become powerful tools that make your English sound much more natural and expressive. So today, we're going to explore 30 idioms you absolutely must know. Before we begin, make sure you subscribe to English Stream, like the video, and comment below telling me which idiom you like the most. All right, let's start with a very common idiom. One idiom you will hear very often in conversations is break the ice. This idiom means to start a conversation in a situation where people feel shy or uncomfortable. Now let's see how we can use this idiom in a sentence. For example, at the beginning of the meeting, the manager told a funny story to break the ice. Now let's look at another example. Example 2. He asked a simple question to break the ice when everyone felt nervous. Another useful idiom you should know is hit the nail on the head. This idiom means to describe exactly what is causing a problem or situation. Now, let's see how this idiom works in context. For example, when Sarah said the team lacked communication, she hit the nail on the head. Let's look at one more example. Example 2, you really hit the nail on the head when you explained why the project failed. Let's move on to another very common idiom, under the weather. This expression is used when someone feels slightly sick or unwell. Now let's put this idiom into a sentence. For example, I'm feeling a little under the weather, so I think I'll stay home today. Now let's see another example. Example 2, she didn't come to work because she was under the weather. Here's another idiom that native speakers use a lot. Cost an arm and a leg. This idiom means something is extremely expensive. Now let's see how we can use it in everyday conversation. For example, that restaurant is amazing, but it costs an arm and a leg. Now let's look at another example. Example 2, buying a house in that city costs an arm and a leg. Let's continue with another very popular idiom, piece of cake. This idiom means something is very easy to do. Now let's see it in action. For example, the exam was a piece of cake. Now here's another example. Example 2, fixing the computer was a piece of cake for him. Let's move on to another interesting expression, once in a blue moon. This idiom describes something that happens very rarely. Now let's see how it's used. For example, I only eat fast food once in a blue moon. Now let's see another example. Example 2, we travel abroad once in a blue moon. Another idiom you might hear in conversations is get cold feet. This means to suddenly become nervous about doing something. Now let's see how we can use it. For example, he got cold feet before giving his speech. And here's another example. Example 2, she got cold feet before the big interview. Let's continue with another fun idiom. Spill the beans. This expression means to reveal a secret. Now let's see how it appears in a sentence. For example, don't spill the beans about the surprise party. Now let's look at another example. Example 2, someone spilled the beans and now everyone knows the plan. Another idiom that's very common in everyday English is call it a day. This means to stop working for the day. Now let's see how we can use it. For example, we worked for 6 hours, so let's call it a day. Now another example. Example 2, I'm tired. I think I'll call it a day. Let's continue with another useful expression. On the same page. This idiom means to agree or understand something in the same way. Now let's see it in a sentence. For example, before we start the project, let's make sure we're on the same page. Now here's another example. Example 2, the team is finally on the same page about the plan. Let's continue with another useful idiom you will often hear in conversations. The ball is in your court. This idiom means it is your responsibility to make the next decision or take the next action. Now let's see how we can use this idiom in a sentence. For example, I've explained everything clearly, so now the ball is in your court. Now let's look at another example. Example 2, I've sent them the proposal, so the ball is in their court now. Let's move on to another interesting expression. Burn the midnight oil. This idiom means to work very late into the night. Now let's see how this idiom appears in a sentence. For example, she burned the midnight oil to finish her report before the deadline. Now let's see another example. Example 2, students often burn the midnight oil before important exams. Here's another idiom that you might hear quite often. A blessing in disguise. This expression describes something that seems bad at first, but later turns out to be good. Now let's see how we can use this idiom in context. For example, losing that job was a blessing in disguise because it helped him find a better career. Now let's look at another example. Example 2, the delay was actually a blessing in disguise because it gave us more time to prepare. Let's continue with another useful idiom. Bite the bullet. This idiom means to accept something difficult or unpleasant and deal with it bravely. Now let's see how we can use this idiom in a sentence. For example, I didn't want to do it, but I had to bite the bullet and apologize. Now let's look at another example. Example 2, she finally bit the bullet and started the difficult conversation. Another very common idiom is kill two birds with one stone. This means to achieve two goals with a single action. Now let's see how we can use this idiom. For example, I listened to an English podcast while exercising to kill two birds with one stone. Now let's look at another example. Example 2, by visiting my parents during my business trip, I killed two birds with one stone. Let's take a look at another useful expression. Cut corners. This idiom means to do something in a quicker or cheaper way by skipping important steps. Now let's see how it can be used in a sentence. For example, the company tried to cut corners and the quality of the product suffered. Now here's another example. Example 2, good engineers never cut corners when safety is involved. Another interesting idiom is go the extra mile. This means to make more effort than what is expected. Now let's see how we can use it. For example, the teacher always goes the extra mile to help her students. Now let's look at another example. Example 2, if you want to succeed, you need to go the extra mile. Let's continue with another idiom you may hear often, the tip of the iceberg. This expression means a small visible part of a much bigger problem or situation. Now let's see how we can use it in a sentence. For example, The mistakes we found are just the tip of the iceberg. Now let's look at another example. Example 2, this issue is only the tip of the iceberg of a larger problem. Another idiom that is very common in everyday English is in hot water. This means to be in trouble or in a difficult situation. Now let's see how we can use it. For example, he was in hot water after missing the important meeting. Now let's see another example. Example 2, she got in hot water for breaking the company rules. Let's move on to another expression. Hit the sack. This idiom simply means to go to bed. Now let's see how it works in a sentence. For example, I'm really tired, so I think I'll hit the sack. Now let's look at another example. Example 2. After a long day at work, he went home and hit the sack. Another idiom that you might hear quite often is a dime a dozen. This means something very common and not special. Now let's see how we can use this idiom. For example, cheap souvenirs are a dime a dozen in tourist areas. Now let's see another example. Example 2, ideas are a dime a dozen, but execution is rare. Let's take a look at another useful idiom. Miss the boat. This expression means to miss an opportunity. Now let's see how we can use it. For example, I didn't apply for the job in time, so I missed the boat. Now here's another example. Example 2, if you wait too long, you might miss the boat. Another fun idiom is pull someone's leg. This means to joke with someone or tease them. Now let's see how we can use it. For example, relax. I'm just pulling your leg. Now let's see another example. Example 2, he thought I was serious, but I was only pulling his leg. Let's move on to another idiom, the last straw. This idiom describes the final problem that makes someone lose patience. Now let's see how we can use this idiom in a sentence. For example, when he arrived late again, it was the last straw. Now let's look at another example. Example 2, the broken printer was the last straw for the frustrated employees. Another very useful expression is think outside the box. This means to think creatively and differently. Now let's see how we can use it. For example, we need to think outside the box to solve this problem. Now let's look at another example. Example 2. Innovative companies encourage employees to think outside the box. Let's continue with another idiom. Add fuel to the fire. This expression means to make a problem or argument worse. Now let's see how we can use it. For example, his angry comments only added fuel to the fire. Now let's see another example. Example 2. Talking about the mistake again will just add fuel to the fire. Another idiom you should know is go with the flow. This means to relax and accept things as they happen instead of trying to control everything. Now let's see how we can use it. For example, I didn't make a strict plan for the trip. I just decided to go with the flow. Now let's look at another example. Example 2, sometimes it's better to go with the flow and enjoy the moment. Let's take a look at another expression. Back to square one. This idiom means to start again from the beginning. Now let's see how we can use it. For example, the plan didn't work, so we're back to square one. Now let's see another example. Example 2, after the system crashed, the engineers were back to square one. Another interesting idiom is out of the blue. This expression means something happening suddenly and unexpectedly. Now let's see how we can use it. For example, he called me out of the blue after many years. Now let's see another example. Example 2, the storm appeared out of the blue. And finally, let's finish with one more useful idiom. Wrap your head around something. This idiom means to understand something complicated or difficult. Now let's see how we can use it. For example, it took me a while to wrap my head around the new system. Now let's look at another example. Example 2, some people find it hard to wrap their heads around advanced technology. All right, those were 30 idioms you absolutely must know if you want your English to sound more natural and fluent. Idioms are everywhere, in movies, podcasts, conversations, and everyday English. The more idioms you recognize, the easier it becomes to understand real conversations. Now, I'd love to hear from you. Which idiom was your favorite? Write it in the comments below. And if you want more episodes like this, learning idioms, expressions, and natural English, make sure to subscribe to English Stream. Like the video and share it with someone who's learning English. This is Ed, and you've been listening to English Stream. See you in the next episode.